We have a special guest. As all of you know, I take pride in trying to bring you and keep you up to date in the small business community. There is one person that you all know I appreciate so much. Whenever I call, he says yes. And I must tell you something, that's not a small thing to have happen here. But I am just proud and honored to say whenever I ask United States Senator Thom Tillis if he'll sit in with us for a little bit to talk small business and what's going on, he always finds a way to say yes, and today is no exception. And we have with us on Zoom United States Senator Thom Tillis. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Joe.
So Senator, let's start with this. You know, my affection for you is because you know, it's funny. You're not on the show because of Joe. You're on the show because you want to make sure people absolutely know in and around the community you're there for them, and you're trying to be transparent, and you're trying to give us information. And I know that because the last time we spoke, we were talking about the PPP program, and not only were you on top of it, but you are helping hundreds of thousands of small business people in North Carolina find their way through that. And it was, I believe, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this if government thought so, the best small business program in my lifetime that I've ever seen happen. Can you kind of give us an update on that?
I really do think that the Paycheck Protection Program was a marvel, and it was so many things had to break in place. It's almost like an in the park home run. And by the way, glad my Braves won on Tuesday night. But so many things had to work together. First, we had to get the policy. We had to get the hundreds of billions of dollars appropriated. But then we also had to rely on the banking sector at all levels, large banks, regional banks, small banks, to underwrite these loans. And Joe, what was amazing is that they were prepared to underwrite these loans while we were still writing the rules, or while the administration was, the Treasury. But they did it, and they saved thousands of businesses. But there were still kinks in the slinky. So we had just caseload after caseload of having to help these businesses get through the Small Business Administration, and to make sure that we were tracking all along the way. But it truly did save businesses, and it saved countless jobs. And it's still working today. And on the back end, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised that the forgiveness program, the other things that we have to do to tidy up the paperwork on the back end, is going relatively well. I still think we have to look at ongoing problems and see what we need to do. Maybe not to the extent of the Paycheck Protection Program, but other businesses are still hurting. Other sectors are still hurting, like large hotels, restaurants, because of labor shortages and other things. And then we have to be prepared for the impact that the mandatory vaccine mandate has for businesses over 100 people. Those are still small to medium-sized businesses, and we need to be prepared for those impacts.
You know, hearing you talk, it warms my heart, right? And it's not because we've known each other for years. It's because I know you get it. You understand the small business man's and women's point of view. And that is a rare treat for us to have a representative doing that. And one of the examples of that, I had the director of SBA on for North Carolina, and he praised you up and down for how you were doing everything you could to help those small business owners back in the middle of the pandemic.
He's a good friend, and I've known him for years. I think it's one of the advantages of spending much more of my life in the private sector helping businesses than in politics. You know, I got into politics back in 2007, still had a job at IBM, and didn't leave that until 2010. So with about 30 years of business under my belt, I like to think that I come in with a bias towards what can we do to help businesses thrive and in the pandemic survive. And that's what we have to focus on. We have to continue to tune the dials and do everything we can to get people back to work safely. And that's what we're focused on now.
And that's why you're such a strong supporter and fan of the listeners of Local Biz Now, my friend, because we get it. We get that you doing everything you can. Thank you for that. So let's keep moving, okay? So now I apologize. You know I'm not a bright man. I need a smart guy like you to help me. I've got some questions I'm going to ask you. They're civic. This is your civics pop quiz, okay? And so here's my question to you. What's the difference between this bill, turning a bill into a law, and this reconciliation bill that they're talking? Can you explain and I know I'm not doing a good job of asking the question, right? But can you explain the difference? Because I don't get it.
Well, first off, I think we ought to change it from calling it reconciliation, because that sounds like a nice term where everybody's coming together, and maybe call it sausage making, because that's what's happening right now. The budget, many people probably don't understand that the budget never really goes to the president's desk. It's guidelines that Congress sets and agrees to between the Senate and the House. So we do a budget resolution, but the president has his recommended budget. He sends it to us, but then Congress, who appropriates, creates their own budget, instructed by the president's budget. So you pass the budget, and you have to do that with a simple majority. But that within the budget rules, you have something called reconciliation, which is something that if you can get 51 votes in the Senate, you no longer have the 60 vote threshold, and you always have a simple majority in the House. If you get 51 votes, then that does go to the president, and that does set spending priorities. It authorizes the administration to spend whatever money is in that bill. So what we're in right now, and you see it in the House, it's been widely reported over the past several months, they're trying to decide how much they want to spend. Originally, they wanted to spend $3.5 trillion. And we've seen a couple of Senate members, Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona and Joe Manchin from West Virginia, probably being the most noteworthy, who have just said, we can't go further into debt. That's Joe Manchin. And Senator Sinema is saying, and we can't put additional tax burdens on businesses at the worst possible time when they're still struggling with the effects of the pandemic. So a $3.5 trillion number is now being discussed at below $2 trillion. And the latest estimates I heard yesterday is somewhere around $1.5 trillion. And it's for their social, they call it social infrastructure. It has nothing to do with roads and bridges and water treatment facilities, broadband. I was a part of the bipartisan group that passed that bill to the House several months ago. This is about social programs, childcare, other things that the Democrats are trying to get together, but they're still having a difficult time getting it out of the House with a simple majority, and an even more difficult time convincing Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin that it's fiscally responsible.
You know, there's some other things I want to talk to you about. Last time we spoke, I asked you about a filibuster. Can you explain to me, because I've been hearing this being floated, that the Senate may consider limiting the filibuster to one or two issues. How do you do that? How do you pick and choose when I'm confused about that.
You can't do that. I got in a little hot water with my colleagues on the Republican side when President Trump wanted to nuke the filibuster, when we could have. I signed on to a letter with 61 other members saying that would destroy the Senate. The Senate truly is a unique democratic institution. It's the only one in the Western world, and of course, it doesn't matter in other than Western countries, democracies, I should say, that we hold our threshold to a very high bar. And we have historically, for centuries, required a higher number than a simple majority. They are now talking about tailoring it, but you can't do that. And the best evidence of that is when Harry Reid nuked the filibuster on judicial nominations. He said, we're only going to do it for district judges and circuit judges, but not the Supreme Court. But there are two calendars. This is sort of like another civics lesson. There are two calendars in the Senate. There's the executive calendar, and then there's the legislative calendar. For decades, we've never really filibustered many nominees. Even Clarence Thomas was not filibustered. we let them go through with a simple majority. But Harry Reid changed that. And then when we got into the majority, we finished that with the Supreme Court nomination. So now everything in the judicial system is subject, and really, I should say, any nominations and advising consent are only 51%. So Chuck Schumer is being disingenuous when he says, well, we're only going to create a special set of legislative calendar items that will not be subject to the 60 vote threshold. If he does that, he's going to destroy the Senate and he's going to change the course of America. And businesses really need to understand this. One of the reasons why 60 votes is so important is the bad news is it's sometimes hard to get good things done. But the good news is it's really hard to get bad things done. If we're at a simple majority, every 2 years or every 4 years, we could have massive swings in tax policy, regulatory policy. So one of the reasons why the United States, even though we're a little bit more expensive to do business than other countries, is still a great place for foreign direct investment is because they know we're not going to have those massive swings based on the ideological whims of an election every 2 years or 4 years. I will never vote. I have said publicly that the day Republicans vote to nuke the filibuster will be the day I leave the Senate, because I'm not going to be a party to destroying what I think is a unique institution that's made this country so great and so attractive for businesses.
So, Senator, I know you got to go. Can you stay over the break? Because I've got some more questions for you when we get to the other side.
Sure.
Thank you. And we are back. You are listening to Local Biz Now. I am Joe Vagnone. This is WSIC, and we are here with United States Senator Thom Tillis. Senator, thank you so much for being here, sir. I really do appreciate it. As you can tell, if you can see, I've got my vaccine badge on, right? About 3 weeks ago, I said something on the show that I really wanted people to get vaccinated. I must tell you something. I've been doing this show almost 9 years. It was the most response of people angry at me. How dare I, a small business guy, what do I know? I hadn't been to a doctor in 15 years. Why am I telling somebody to be vaccinated? It really has become this strange conversation in the political realm. So I wanted to ask you, can you give me your opinion on the vaccine mandate and your opinion on this? Because, man, I got to tell you something. Be careful what you say, because it's a sensitive subject right now.
Oh, Joe, I've done a great job making people mad on this issue. Look, I got the vaccine and I recently got the booster. I really do encourage people to get the vaccine. We have to keep in mind that over 3 billion people in the world have gotten the vaccine. We haven't seen any significant health consequences as a result. Having said that, those who are unvaccinated, we have seen really significant health consequences. I talked to the head of the Duke medical system a couple of months ago, and about 98% of the people who were dying at Duke Medical Center of COVID were unvaccinated, and the remainder. And this is not over the course of time. This is over the course of about, I think, the last 5 or 6 months since the vaccine was a little bit more prevalent. Those who died who had the vaccine, most of them had what they call comorbidities. So they had other fundamental illnesses that made them more vulnerable. So I think that I'm having this debate, by the way, in my own family. I've got family members, not in my immediate family, but I have family members who are opposed to the vaccine. And I just tell them, well, be careful. I would prefer that you get the vaccine because we want to get this virus out of our health hazards and also out of our business hazards. Now, having said that, I've got a real problem with President Biden's vaccine mandate, because the reality is, I was just talking to a defense contractor in the Greensboro area this week. About 30 or 40% of their employees do not have a vaccine. They think that they may be able to get another half of those done. That's a 20% reduction in force for a business that already is looking for hundreds of people. And this is a defense contractor. Now, if you move over to the Defense Department, we could have 5 to 7% of our active duty military separated over the next couple of months. And that's a real problem. It's going to be a problem with recruiting in the military. there are certain areas of government where I wouldn't mind seeing some reduction in force, but certainly not in law enforcement and in national defense. And now you go to the private sector, any business over 100 employees. We're going to see a lot of people lose their jobs, and they're not going to be able to go to another job because the vaccine mandate is going to be applied to any business with employees over 100. So I oppose the way that the president's gone about it. I do encourage people to get the vaccine, and I think I had a discussion with a police officer who doesn't want to get the vaccine, so he may end up being separated as well, as will thousands of others across the country. He said, I just don't like the government telling me what to do. I said, then why do you give me speeding tickets? We've decided that we want people to drive on a certain side of the road. That's a regulation, government telling us what to do. We've decided that speeds in certain areas based on turns, traffic, everything else should be set at certain levels for the safety of the community. So why don't we look at it that way and recognize that we're taking a weapon off the table for a virus that has killed millions of people worldwide and hundreds of thousands of people in the United States. So for those who are going to call in and get mad at me, I respect your opinion, your decision not to get the vaccine. But if we get another variant and we have healthcare workers who are not going to be employed because the vaccine mandate kicks in, then you need to think about what may happen if you don't get the vaccine and you need to find a hospital room and there's no room in that hospital. I've just got to speak plainly to my friends, my family members, and others who have made that choice and think through the logical conclusion of your decision. And as a conservative and a person who believes in personal responsibility, own that decision if a bad consequence occurs.
You know, for me, Senator, I'm 58 years old. I grew up having to get vaccinations to go to school, to play football. I never saw this as a political issue at all. I thought it was my government helping me.
Joe, I think a part of that is we could be a victim of our own success. I mean, Project Warp Speed under the last administration it's going to go down in history as one of the most remarkable things that medical science and biotech has ever done. We produced a vaccine to counter a pandemic in a matter of months. That's extraordinary. So I think a part of it is when you talk about the polio vaccine or flu vaccines, things that took years to actually produce. I think some people may be rightfully concerned that it went too quickly, but I would assure all of them that this went through the FDA process. There was an emergency use authorization, and then they were finally approved and taken off of emergency use. But I can understand that hesitancy for some people, particularly there are people for religious reasons and for maybe other health reasons, talking with their doctors, mothers, expectant mothers, people who want to have a child. They need to just talk to their doctor and take their doctor's advice, as they do with any other illness when they get sick and they go to the doctor's office or a hospital.
Right. So I heard Donald Trump say the cure cannot be worse than the virus. And I must tell you something, that seems kind of insightful now to me when I look back. Can you talk about where you think we are right now as a country trying to get back to something that looks normal?
Well, we're close. It's one of the reasons why I hope some people will consider getting the vaccine, because we don't have to be 100% vaccinated to have effectively herd immunity, which will make it very difficult for COVID to continue to spread. It'll still be here. I mean, COVID's going to be like the seasonal flu. We're going to be talking about COVID probably for decades. The question is whether or not it becomes an annual shot and it will be dealt with the way that we deal with the flu. You know, in a bad year, we lose 60 or 70,000 people from the flu. A little bit lower number this year, I think, because of social distancing and masks. We're seeing a little bit lower inflation. That's another problem in Washington, but infection rate. But we've just got to get up to that magic number of, I think it's around 80%, a little bit over that, of the population vaccinated before we've got ball control over the virus. If we don't, we're going to have hospitals, we're going to have supply chain problems, we're going to have labor problems, we're going to have hospital capacity problems. North Carolina is holding its own now, but other states are literally triaging patients and not able to serve all of them in the hospitals when they show up at the emergency room.
And that's what this whole thing started to begin with, is let's keep the hospitals for the sick. And so this,
Right.
to me, that seems to be where we are. Okay, let's move on a little bit because I know you got to go. I watched you on Fox News Sunday. You look great, by the way, on Fox News Sunday the last week or so, and you were talking about that you had. Let me see if I can get this correct. You had requested from the Attorney General information on the details on why or how the exact incidents citing harassment, intimidation, and threats from two teachers and school board members. Did you get an answer from the Attorney General on that question?
No, I haven't yet, and we're going to continue to press it. What I told the Attorney General, that was probably a clip from our judiciary hearing, or it may have been an interview.
It was right after the judiciary hearing, yes.
Yeah. But it always angers me when I hear somebody in the administration come before an oversight hearing and say, well, it was just a memo. We didn't mean to intimidate anybody. When you send out a memo saying that you may have the FBI surveilling school board meetings and checking on the behavior of a parent, I said, do you understand that we're not going to deny the First Amendment? We just want to get bad actors out. But when you send that message out there, somebody like me, who was PTA president over at Hopewell High School just 15 years ago, it may give me pause as to whether or not I want to get in there. I've gotten angry at school boards before. A lot of parents have. What do I have to kind of draw back? So I said, you're having a chilling impact on future school board meetings by really making parents wonder whether or not they can go out and express their concerns. And what we saw in Loudoun County was horrible. Rape of a 13-year-old girl by a boy who was in a dress, who went in to the girl's restroom, and it was covered up. And so I told the Attorney General, number one, the School Board Association retracted a lot of the letter that they said was the singular reason they sent the memo. But I said, you really need to rethink that. We're seeing behaviors in schools now that I think are I can't find a kind word, so I'll just say bad. but
so
where parental involved in the school board, involved in the schools, is one of the most important things for a child's success. I saw that at Hopewell High School when I was PTA president. So anything that would actually discourage parents from knowing what their children are being taught and being involved in that process is a very, very dangerous thing to do for the future of that child.
And let's be clear, because I think we can all agree, there's a big difference between Joe expressing in his loud Italian expression his discomfort and any kind of physical threat or picking up a brick. There's a big difference there.
Right. And guess what? If somebody touches someone else or is aggressive, then they've got to answer to the law. Bottom line. There's no justification for violence.
Yep.
There's no justification for threats and intimidation. Incidentally, there's no justification for the 50 people who protested at my house back in August and trespassed on my property. That's where you cross the line. But, if you, Joe, you've probably been to a school board meeting. I know you've been to town and county commission meetings. It gets heated. And for an individual, for a parent who may have never shown up before a board before, it's intimidating. And depending upon how the person running the meeting behaves, it can be angering. So I don't mind angry discourse, and I don't mind aggressive debate. I do mind people crossing the line and threatening and intimidating. Like I said, they have to be responsible for their actions. But I like good-spirited, loud debates. That's what democracy is all about. And we should be encouraging it, not discouraging it. And that's what I think the Department of Justice did when Merrick Garland signed that memo.
What you were describing is what I heard Vice President Pence say. That's the sound and voice of liberty. I've got no problem with it. Let's try and move, because I know you got to go. This is a softball. Who in the world came up with the idea to pay over $400,000 to illegal immigrants crossing over the border and being separated from their family? Where did this come? I cannot believe I'm even asking this question.
Well, let's talk about how it started. First off, I'm completely opposed to it. I intend to put forth a bill when we get back after recess that actually disallows what they're doing. What started was the ACLU represented people who crossed the border illegally during the Trump administration, and they were separated from their children. And they're saying that that was an egregious thing. There may be some unique circumstances where the government did something inappropriate. I'm willing to talk about that. But they're talking about the mere act of separation. This is amazing to me. Joe, if you were arrested for a crime, let's say you were a single parent and you had 2 children, and you were arrested for a crime, you're going to be separated from your children. Now let's go back and think about these families and what they did before they got across the southern border. They made a dangerous decision to take a child sometimes hundreds or thousands of miles to get to the southern border, to find a cartel and pay them roughly $5,000 per person. This is a criminal organization to get them across the border. And in some cases, they separated the children and allowed a criminal to carry them across the border. In the United States, you can get a visit from social services if you let your child walk a half a mile to a public park, or if you leave them in a parked car when you go into a store. Think about the danger that these parents subjected their children to. And also, think about the fact that 80% of the people crossing the border now or more do not have a valid asylum claim. In other words, they had no reasonable threat of being harmed in their country of origin. They want to come here and get a job. And I understand that. But is it really worth putting those children at risk? So when they come across the country or they come across the border, by definition, they have broken our law, our federal law. And when you break the law, you get separated from your family for a period of time until you ultimately have your case adjudicated. And many of these families get brought back together before they're adjudicated because it takes a year or 2 to get an asylum claim processed. Now we've got 1.5 million asylum claims in the immigration court backlog. So if these specific cases, we're asking, tell us about the specific cases. If you're talking about someone when they were in custody, some real harm came to that child, then that's a different discussion than setting up a process that may be telling the world that if you come to this country and you get separated from your children, you may be entitled to a $400,000, $200,000, but a 6-figure settlement because we separated you after you broke our laws and you endangered that child in the process. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, Senator,
that's what it's about. The American people are going to reject it.
Oh, I'll tell you, if there's ever something I've heard loud and clear from small business people is I can't comprehend that. They cannot comprehend that. I know you got to go. I got 2 more questions for you. Here's the first one. Can you talk a little bit about cybersecurity? You know, that's an issue for small business people. We've got 1 to 5 to 10 computers. It has become a new expense on the P&L. So it's a line item on our balance sheets of purchasing equipment that didn't used to be there. It's real, and I know you know a little bit about this. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, this may be an area where I make small business a little mad, but hear me out. So many small businesses have been able to come into being because the internet has really reduced the cost of entry for certain businesses, and other businesses have benefited from technology. So technology on the front end took a lot of cost out of the cost of operations. So every business needs to be cyber savvy. They need to understand that having the right kinds of firewalls and cybersecurity in place is no different than spending the extra money to have alarm systems and security systems in your physical buildings. So number 1, do your homework, understand what your responsibility is, and also keep in mind that most of the successful penetrations of businesses network or home networks are the human factor, somebody making a mistake. Sony was a classic example of that. That was not a sophisticated attack. That was somebody tapping on a phishing message that ultimately got malware into Sony's infrastructure. So I would recommend, if for all your small businesses, and I'm serious about this, go get the book, Hacking for Dummies. It's a great book that will give you insights into things that you need to understand or risks day to day that you need to take care of. Now, the federal government needs to play a role. As a matter of fact, next week or the week after next, I have a bill with a Democratic colleague that's going to instruct the administration to create a whole taxonomy on cyber crimes. We don't really drill down to the details on what a cyber crime is and what the charges should be and when the Department of Justice, the FBI should get involved. So we've got to treat this like we do all other crimes and make sure that there's a clear consequence and an easy way to prosecute people when we find out that they've acted badly. We also have to work against foreign actors. A lot of the risk comes from foreign countries, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. And we've got to do a better job of defensive and offensive capabilities. When we catch somebody red-handed and we have the ability to shut them down, then we need to be able to do that. That's the role the federal government needs to play. And we also need to work with businesses to help them understand and get educated on what they need to do to put those burglar bars up and those alarm systems in their cyber office.
Thank you, Sen. One last question. You know I like to do this with you. I have fun with this. Do you know Joe Manchin? And tell us your thoughts about him, because as of today, I'm a middle of the road conservative kind of guy, right? He's like my favorite Democrat right now. You know that, don't you? So give me your opinion of Joe.
Well, I mean, I know Joe well and Senator Sinema. As a matter of fact, they were 2 of 5 judges in my chili cook-off competition in my office this week. I know them well. And actually, last week, I dressed my newest puppy. You may have heard barking. I got home late last night. I'm working from my home office. I dressed him up as Senator Sinema in the dog parade last week. He's a 70-pound big puppy, 7 months old. I know them both very well. I know most of the members of the Democratic Conference well. And Joe is great to work with. But I will tell you that Kyrsten Sinema is every bit as steadfast in holding the line on the overreach that Pelosi is proposing. So I know them well. I work with them. I speak with them every day. And I'm glad that we have people who are truly on the Democratic side, who are truly concerned with the consequences of an overreach for a tax and spending spree. Ultimately, if they were to move forward with a $3.5 trillion package or even a $1.5 trillion package, people like me, back in 1978 and 79, and before that with my family, who grew up in a trailer park, went to community colleges, trying to get a job, those people who are in those circumstances today are the ones that I am concerned with who are going to get harmed the most. And we already see that with the so-called state and local tax deduction. I did a floor speech yesterday. The majority of the people who are going to benefit from their latest proposal are people making over $100,000 a year. Parents making over $67,000 a year, which is the median income in the United States, get no child tax credit. But a single parent who makes the same amount of money will. There are all kinds of disparities out there that resonate with Joe Manchin, resonate with Senator Sinema, and I'm glad that they're willing to take the heat. They're taking a lot of heat. Senator Sinema and Joe have both been protested at their homes, at weddings that they've gone to. They have been ruthless, and I've really admired their courage and their honesty, and I support them 100% on this matter. And I'll probably disagree with them on other ones.
Sure. Senator, we got to go, and I know you have to go, sir. I cannot thank you enough. I always enjoy having you on, and we always appreciate the fact that when Local Biz Now calls, you answer it and say, yes, Joe, we'll be happy to come in. Thank you so much.
I will every time, Joe. Take care.
Thank you, my friend. You are listening to Local Biz Now, and we just spoke with, in my opinion, the most genuine United States Senator, Senator Thom Tillis. If it's Friday morning, your business matters. We'll be right back.